Today's project is really the start of a multi-day project. We're going to be replacing the floor pans in a 1974 Dodge truck. Replacing the floor pans in just about any vehicle is about the same process. I actually started working on this project a few months ago before I started my channel, so I don't have any photos or video of removing the rubber floor mat, which is pretty easy to do. I also don't have any video of the condition of the floor that caused me to want to replace it in the first place.
Alright, so the next step really is going to be to take this seat out. Seat's bolted in. 2 bolts down underneath here. You can see there's one there. I am about even with the mirror here. This is where the e-brake goes through. So we've got 1 bolt here. You can see they look nice and clean. That's because I've actually had this out to reupholster the seat not too long ago. There's another one here. Then we have the same over on the other side of the vehicle. So I got these bolts off. Now it's actually worth noting. Take a look. Let's look at the replacement pan that they've done here. You can see they cut it out fairly straight edge. This is the frame. It goes back on the other side of the frame. And they did similar up here. You know, it's not the greatest cut, but it's not horrible. They removed all the rust. But then this whole plate is it wasn't coated with anything, so it's already starting to rust. But the bigger problem is this wasn't sealed in any way. So water and salt and things like that can get up in underneath this and start to rot it away really, really quickly. And even up in here we can see up into the cab there's a gap, but look at the size of the gap. Come on, focus up there. Look at the size of the gap up here. I mean, I can almost, stick my finger up in there. How big that gap is. So, another example of how not to do stuff. Over here on the passenger side, I see some self-tappers poking out here. There are several of them, but I don't see any evidence that the floor was cut all the way through. So I would guess that the plate on top is just screwed down. It was probably rusting and they pushed it right down over the top. Hard to say, but we'll find out when we get in there. Alright, here is the new pan. You can see it's kind of got this recess here, which matches the recess up here where the dimmer switch goes. It's got this little recess here, which is the same as this where the gas pedal goes. So it actually is designed to go significantly up there if you need it. So what we're going to do is we'll end up probably not using this whole pan. We're going to use as much of it as we can, but we want to get out this old piece. It's the right one. That's all we're really checking right now, so we'll work on getting it out. Okay, so I opted to remove the transmission tunnel. It wasn't sealed down, you can see. So the old seal was broken anyway, and stuff's going to get up in there. Also, you can see it was rusted out a little bit. It just pulled that off. I couldn't get that guy out of there. But you can see, notice how here, kind of hard to tell with this lighting, but it's flat right here, right? Comes across the floor and it lays flat. This new pan you can see it actually curves up a little bit there. I suspect it looks a whole lot like it. This ridge right here is the line where that goes. So we probably want to remove that there all the way up to meet. So that's, then we'll have to make new holes for where those screws come in. Probably weld on some nuts on the back side.
I took the pan out, went over, cut it to size with the plasma torch. You can see it fits pretty well all the way around. Before I weld it into place, I'm going to do a little bit of prep work underneath where it's easy to get at. I also need to fabricate the attachment points for the transmission tunnel.
When I took the transmission tunnel out, this part right here was really thin and rotten. You can see, it was really thin and it broke off. It's supposed to have one of these bolt holes in it. You can kind of see the roundness of it right there. So I'm going to cut another piece of tin off of that floor pan that I just got, the spare, fill this in and run a hole back through so I've got a hold down spot for it. Alright, so now on this piece that we've got, we need to account for these holes here. So what I'll do on the pan is I'm going to drill holes through and weld nuts to the bottom side so that we can run a screw here. I've made sure all the way around that the holes line up on all the other pieces with what I'm after. So now I just need to mark this pan where the holes are. The easiest way to do it is that. Because it's going to be way easier to get to this stuff with no floor pan in. I'm going to hit it with some of this rust reformer first, let that dry, and then hit it with some rubberized undercoat. So we'll hit it with both of those, just on the frame stuff, not on the pieces that I'm going to weld. We'll come back and do those, but right now I'm going to just do this. This piece of body frame, the truck frame, and this transmission cross member. Okay, you can see I've gone around the edges on it now. Just went around with the flap disc and took paint off so that I've got a clean surface on that I can weld to. What we're going to do now is we're going to go through and find the places that it is nice and flush and tight. And we're going to tack it every 4 inches or, maybe a little bit more. We don't want to run a bead. We're going to just tack it in place. We don't want to put a lot of heat into this and it'll warp. So we'll tack it in place. And places like this where it's up, humped up a little bit more than the floor than I'd like, we'll tack on each end, and then we'll use a body hammer and push that back down against the floor. Do that all the way around. Tack it around, and then once we've got it tacked and it's cool enough, we'll come back and tack in between the welds that are there. And basically just keep going in circles until we've got it down. Over here, we're going to do a little clamping because it's really floppy, so we're going to clamp them together where we want them and then work on it there.
At this point, I basically have the entire driver's side attached down. I still have to do some finishing and paint work, but before I do that, I'm going to go in and do the passenger side. The passenger side is basically just a repeat of what happened on the driver's side, so it's just going to be mostly time-lapse.
Alright, now we're going to go over all of the seams, the ones I welded, as well as all of the factory ones in the area with some brushable seam sealer. It's kind of like it's a flexible, kind of almost like a paste. It's really thick, about the consistency of caulking or something along those lines. So I'm going to put this on before we paint, so it gives us a nice sealed base. Alright, so I sprayed this morning with just a rattle can truck bed liner. Something that's going to be fairly durable. You can see I just went up to the old seam here. I didn't go above it. That's going to potentially get painted when I paint the inside of the cab. I haven't decided yet, but pretty much I painted where the floor mat's going to cover. Alright, we've got her all closed up top. Got the seats back in, put the floor mat back in. Everything's good to go up above. But now, underneath here, we've got these areas where the new floor pan here meets the frame. So we want to seam seal along all of this just to keep water, come on, focus, just to keep water and the like out. There we go. So we're going to try to keep water and especially salt spray and things like that from getting up in there and causing problems. So we're going to seam seal it and then let that dry in, you know, for an hour, maybe a day, whatever, and then come back and hit it with rubberized undercoat as well. So again, just going to use this same Eastwood brushable seam sealer. It says brushable, but it take a real stiff brush to do so. So I just use a putty knife. So I'm going to get under here and do that.
In an effort to keep this video at least somewhat short, I left out a lot of repetitive steps, things that I found were not terribly interesting. There were some tools and techniques that I used in this that are probably interesting, but they would have made the video just too long. We'll go back and look at those tools and techniques in further videos later in the future. At any rate, we've got new floor pans in the truck, and it's ready to go, so this is another project complete. Thanks for watching.